ML, so to introduce ML, she's Professor of Special Education at Vanderbilt University and holds the Nicholas Hobbs Chair in Special Education and Human Development. Her research focuses on effective instruction, supporting social emotional development, and addressing challenging behaviour. As part of that, there's much more. But ML was involved in the development of the pyramid model for supporting social emotional competence in young children. So I would like to hand over to ML. Thank you everybody again for attending. And ML will start the webinar. Let's take a peek into a pyramid model classroom. How does a caring community support the development of peer relationships? Thanks, ML.
Thank you, Denise. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we
Denise?
can. Yep, we can hear you well.
Right. Cool. All right. So you hold on, let me get this moving here. There we go. So good morning to y'all, or I guess it's morning, afternoon. What?
Yeah.
Okay. It's nighttime. It's nighttime here, but anyway, thank y'all all for joining us today. I'm very excited to do this. I have way more prepared than we can possibly do in an hour, but we'll do what we can, and I do want to try to get to some of your questions. So my plan for the night is to do a little bit of introductions, to talk a little bit about why this is important, although you probably wouldn't be here if you didn't agree with me that this is an important topic. I want to do a real quick overview of the pyramid just as the context for the specific part of the pyramid model practices that we're going to be talking about today, which is really creating caring communities and promoting peer relationships. So I would like for y'all, if you can, to open the chat. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to type a few things into the chat. And then also, as Denise said, y'all can feel free to post answers in the chat, questions, sorry. And somebody will try to get those questions to me, or we'll come back to them at the end of the webinar. So with that said, I'm going to do just a really quick introduction of myself, in addition to what Denise said. I think one thing that I kind of pride myself on in my work is that I'm never far from teachers and children and programs and classrooms. I do a lot of research and I spend a lot of time writing books and articles and things, but I also spend a lot of time out with children and families and teachers and educators and coaches. And so you see a lot of that in these pictures. And I want to just point out that this group of teachers and coaches and educators and researchers in this picture are my colleagues in Australia who really started this work with me, pyramid work in Australia in I don't know, about 12 years ago. And many of them are still involved in the work and are really some of my closest colleagues. And then I also like to have a little bit of fun. And so you see some pictures of me traveling to some of my favorite places, and pretty much anything I can do outside, I love to do outside. So now I want to know a little bit about you. So this is where I want you to type into the chat your role, what your role is in the early childhood space or field, and where you are right now. Not like at your house, but like what city you're in right now. So I'm going to see if people are able to type that into the chat. And if I can see it. Oh, there we go. Ronnie from New Zealand, one of my favorite places. Who else? Oh, here we go. Oh, now it's going to go too fast for me, but yay. Oh, I was in Newcastle my last trip here. Saw that. So they're from all over. This is really cool. And lots of different roles. I'd love to come back. All right. Okay. Oh, look, someone's from Noah's Ark. Okay, great. So I see that we have a lot of roles represented, a lot of locations represented. I see a lot of familiar names, which is also fun. So I really want this to be applicable to you. So if there's a place where it would help to have me clarify something, please, please feel free to drop some questions in the chat. All right. So moving on, this is the part where I say, why is this important? And you're like, you're here. And so it's important, but I really do want to frame what we know about early social emotional development. I want to frame what I'm going to be talking about in the context of that. And, we all know that social emotional development is the foundation upon which children learn other things. I often talk about social emotional development is both a domain of learning. So you learn social skills, you develop emotional competencies, but it's also a context for learning other skills, right? It's in the context of interactions that children learn about language. It's in the context of exploring your environment that you learn about cognitive skills, motor skills, and it's in those contexts that we really learn to be social, right? And so we're learning both how to be social and learning other important skills at the same time. I think another thing that kind of is important about the area of social emotional development is that it's really a defining characteristic for a lot of children who have disabilities or more intensive support needs, meaning that lots of those children need more supports, right, in the area of social skills and emotional development. And then I think the last thing that I want to just mention is that when you talk to families of young children, it's something that families want for their children, right? They want them to be included. They want them to feel like they belong. They want them to have friends. And so all of those things make it really important, but also the data on how early social emotional development impacts later outcomes is important. So I could tell you about a bunch of studies, but one that I think is pretty compelling was one that was published about 7 or 8 years ago, where these researchers interviewed or asked kindergarten teachers to rate children's social skills and emotional competencies. And then they looked at those children 19 years later. And what they found 19 years later was those children whose teachers had rated them with better social skills, sharing, cooperating, taking turns, those kinds of things that are kind of the hallmark of the early childhood year. Those adults were more likely to have graduated from high school. They were more likely to have gone to college. They were more likely to have a job, and they were less likely to be arrested and less likely to have substance abuse issues. And so that's a correlational study, but it's pretty convincing that early social emotional development sets children on a path for better outcomes, both in school and life. But we also know that when children don't have great social emotional skills, it sometimes looks like behavior that's challenging. I'm going to play this video. You don't really need to hear the sound, but what I want you to notice is this little boy right here. I saved her. You are using the phone right now. I saved her. I saved her. Okay, so that kind of escalates from there. But what you see is a little boy who both has some regulation issues, some self-regulation issues, but also what gets him upset is that a child starts to play with a toy that he was playing with, right? So we see a child who really just needs more support around social emotional development. And yet I think these are the children who adults find challenging, and we know that these are the children that are often excluded from early childhood settings. And that might not look like they're asked not to come back, but it might look like they're pulled to another room. It might look like they're sent home early. whatever, as opposed to thinking about those behaviors as an opportunity, right? This is an opportunity to help this child learn some really important skills. Whoops. And what we know about this is that, so if I had played this whole video, which was really quite long, what you would have seen was that the teacher did a really nice job of kind of co-regulating with him and eventually got him calm. And once he was calm, she was able to get him to practice some good self-regulation skills, right? But what we know is that if we only do this in response to problem behavior or to behavior that's challenging, we're not likely to be effective unless we're also being proactive about teaching social skills and promoting emotional competencies. And so we sometimes think about this as, when is the right time to teach? Not time in children's life, but in a classroom day, when's kind of the time that we ought to be really focusing on promoting social skills and promoting emotional competencies. And so if you think about that little boy we just saw, the time for him to practice regulation, calm down strategies, those kind of things, would be where this green circle is. It would be at the beginning of the day. Maybe the teacher does a little work with him and a friend about practicing what you do when somebody takes a toy and you want the toy, or what you do when you're feeling angry, whatever the skill is you're working on with the child. We ought to be teaching those all the time, right? So that when children need them, they're able to use them. Now, in that particular classroom, another good time to teach would have, when we're sitting there watching the video, we see the behavior coming, right? We see Xavier turn around and look at the kid and and you can tell he's escalating. That would be a really good time as well for the teacher to prompt him to use whatever the skills are he's working on. But in busy classrooms, when you have 15 or 20 or 30 children in a classroom, you miss those opportunities. And when Xavier's kind of melting down and trying to slam the door on children's fingers, those aren't teachable moments, right? But once children calm down and we get back over to this green place, those are teachable moments. And I think the message about that is we ought to be thinking about these skills all day, every day, right? And prompting them and supporting children to use them and providing opportunities to use them at a time when the child's behavior hasn't escalated. So that's the kind of big message. So how do we help children practice these skills and learn these skills all day, every day? And that's kind of what I'm going to focus on the rest of this talk. So I know a lot of you are familiar with the pyramid model because I know some of you, but the pyramid model is a basic public health model, which just is about, there's good universal practices around relationships and high quality supportive environments that all children need to develop healthy social emotional skills, competence development. Some children, for any number of reasons, might need more targeted support around that. And that's kind of what's in the green level. So who are the children who might need more support, either because they have a delay, either because they've experienced trauma, but for any number of reasons, children might need more targeted support. And in our early childhood settings, when we do a really good job with those levels of the pyramid, we really don't have many children who need something more intensive, but we want to be ready for that, right? We want to be ready with a plan and supports to help those children whose behavior maybe persists, even when those more targeted and universal supports are in place. But what's important about this model is that social emotional development is kind of integrated into all of those tiers, right? It's kind of part of everything we do around pyramid model practices. And all of this is dependent on adults who are supported to implement these practices. And I won't be able to talk about this a lot tonight, but I'll talk about it when I'm over there in April and May. which is really about how do we coach and support educators to be able to implement these practices um, with each and every child. And we will come back to that for a minute here in just a little bit. And so I'm going to again ask you to type a few things into the chat. So we're going to talk about how you create a caring community of learners. And I want you all to think about a group that you're a part of. It could be a book group, it could be a sailing group, it could be a team at work, it could be any group that you spend a lot of time with and feel really connected to. And I'm wondering, what about that group? What makes you feel a part of that group? When you feel a part of a group, what are the things that make you feel a part of that group? I'm going to ask you to type a few things into the chat. Anybody brave enough? I think oh, there we go. Good. Shared interests, being involved in decisions, your voice is heard, you feel welcome, you have choice, you have agency. Yes, it's regular kind of contact. You feel like you're heard, all of those things. So all of those things are shared interests, shared experiences. All of those things are what makes a caring classroom community. Each of those things translated to what does that look like when you're 3, 4, 5, 6 years old is what we mean by having a caring community. And so the way that we think about it in our work is that you've got to have a supportive environment. And that can be things, using your all's language, like regular contacts, right? It's about having common interests. It's about being able to help make decisions. That's what we consider to be kind of what we consider to be a supportive environment. Positive, caring relationships. You all are talking about being kind, having open communication, feeling welcome, people listening to you. All of those kind of things are what we think about around caring relationships. And when we do that, you feel supported and valued, right? You feel heard, you get to help make decisions. And all of that leads to this notion of belonging, right? Which is really the heart of what we want the pyramid model to lead to in terms of our early childhood spaces. So we've taken those things that y'all typed into the chat and what we know about good early childhood practice, and we've thought about what do we do to create that caring classroom community. And you will see these things across the bottom map directly on to the things y'all talked about in the chat, right? That there's some shared ownership. That's about, do we get to make meaningful decisions about what happens in our classroom, right? Do we identify as a classroom or as a school? Do we have some identity that holds us together? We talk a lot about whether children see themselves in the environment, and that can be, do they see themselves physically, right? Are there pictures of them? Are there pictures of their family? Are there books that look like their family? Are there pretend play materials that look like things that are important to them? But it can also be about the way adults talk in classrooms, right? So do children hear about their families? So if their primary caregiver is their grandmother, or another child has 2 mothers, or another child lives with their dad, do we hear conversations that don't just talk about moms and dads, right? Where children feel that who they are is seen and heard in that classroom. And then what we're going to spend tonight on is really how we reflect the culture of kindness. And I think we're very committed to this notion that, everything we are doing is leading to children to learn about being kind and helpful and just. And you'll hear that through all of the things that I'm going to talk about for the rest of tonight. All right. Before I jump into that, are there any questions, anybody has, before just going to scroll up and see if there are.
There's none in the chat, ML, but someone would like to come off mute and just ask away. Go for it.
I'll give people a second and I'll drink a sip of water. All right, I'll keep going. You can type if something comes up, let me know. All right, so creating a culture of kindness. So I think we would say that we have to create a context to make everything else happen that I'm going to talk about around specific strategies. So we have to create a classroom or a context, whether it's regardless of the setting, about where being helpful and being kind are part of who we are. We use that language. Children hear that language. I can tell Denise is excited because her friend shared her, I don't know, cookie with her, whatever, that we're hearing that language a lot, and that we're engaging both children and families in generating ideas about what that looks like to be kind, not just at school, but at home, in the community. It's just the nature of who we are as a program, as a classroom, as a setting. And so I'm going to give you, so what I want to do is kind of talk from that context. The transition I want to make here is, so we're doing those things, right? We're promoting this culture of kindness. We have made it important in the way that we talk in the classroom. We're always coming up with examples of it. And part of that is about being inclusive of our friends, right? And so then in our work, we've started thinking, if you really want children to interact with each other, if you really want children to have meaningful friend relationships with their peers, you kind of have to make everything social. And that's kind of the new language. Can we make it social, right? Which means, can you take a kind of typical everyday activity and think about how you can up the number of opportunities there are for children to be helpful, for children to interact with their peers in meaningful ways. And so this picture you have on your screen right now is a picture of two little boys who go to an early childhood program that's Montessori inspired, not Montessori, but Montessori inspired. And what they do in this classroom is they have tea parties. And the teacher has created a context where I'm going to look at my notes because these are the things that she told me that she has children do. So if you want to have tea, you have to ask a friend to come have tea with you. And so that's part of having the tea party. If you want to have tea and it's not a tea party, you can still have tea. But if you're coming to the tea party, you have to have a friend to come with you. The children have to set up the tea party, so they actually have to get the cups and the saucers and do all of that. And then they have to pass the honey and all the things that they need for the tea kettle. And then at the end, they're responsible for cleaning it up. And so if you think about that as a context for lots of opportunities for peer interactions, that's what we're talking about making it social. One thing I want to say, and I meant to say it earlier, but I'll say it here, is that we also are ever so mindful that there are children who are more internalizing children who may make choices to do things alone more often than other children. And what we try to balance in classrooms is giving children like that supportive opportunities to be engaged with their peers, but to also accept that some children are much happier doing some things by themselves. And so I think that's a really fine line that you have to walk, but I think it's really important that for children with more internalizing behaviors, that we understand that too much social can sometimes help result in those children feeling anxious. And so as I'm talking about making it social, I want you to also know that we respect the fact that there are some children who may choose to be less social, and we really want them to have the agency to do that. All right. So what I'm going to do now is show you just a series of slides and videos that are just more examples of how we create opportunities for peer relationships. And one thing I want to kind of point out about this particular video. So this is a arrival routine in the morning. So again, you don't really have to hear the sound. But essentially what happens is when each child comes in, the child who's the greeter greets them, gives them their name, and then the children are supposed to be putting their names on to answer the question of the day, which is, how did you get to school today? And what I want to point out about this video is this child who's being the greeter could potentially be a child who needs more support around initiating and interacting with their peers. And one of the reasons we do things like this is to give children a really supportive context in which to practice those skills, right? So imagine a child who rarely initiates to other children, but who shows interest in other children and who may be anxious about interacting with other children, but they show the interest and want to. We want to create a context where it's safe to do that. And so this gives children kind of a routine in which it's really easy to be the greeter for the day, right? Because children have learned what that process is. Again, you can have children take turns being greeters, right? It might be something that you draw names out of a hat for children to be a greeter. It could be one of your classroom helper roles. It could be any number of things, but it's a way to take a really typical part of your morning routine and turn it into an opportunity for children to practice social skills. All right. Oh, no, we don't want to watch that again. All right. Another thing I wanted to just mention was that it's not always it's not always, do we have these specific strategies or are we trying this specific routine? But it's also what we as adults do to promote peer relationships. So I always have to tell this story about, I was in a classroom one day and this there were two computers and each computer had a chair at it. And this little girl went over to play so there was a little boy sitting in one chair and this little girl went over to play. And the teacher called the child back because she hadn't cleaned up or something like that. And when the child went to clean up, of course, someone sat in that chair, right? And so then she came over and she was so upset that the chair was now taken. And being the good, classroom helper I am, I almost jumped in to help them. But before I had a chance, the little boy sitting in the other chair said, "It's okay, you can sit with me." And he moved over and let the little girl sit on the chair with him. And I thought that was such a good example of how adults sometimes intervene in a way that maybe interrupts the interaction or makes it about the adult being the helper, when what we really need to do is focus on how we can have children help each other, how children can begin to see other children in the classroom as a resource, right? They can help me when I'm feeling sad. They can help me when I don't know what to do. But they come to focus on each other. And so some of these questions I have for you on this screen is really about, what are we doing in our interactions with children to really put the focus on children interacting with each other? All right, another thing that we have been doing a lot with in our settings is using this strategy that we call stay, play, talk. And it's as simple as it sounds simple, but it's not that simple, is teaching children to stay, play, and talk with another child. And so we use stay, play, talk primarily as a way to increase the time children spend playing with each other. And in the past, we have done it around children who are just low rate initiators or just low rate play partners. But this is one, so we just finished a really small study where it was, well, let me show you the video and then I'll tell you about the study. So again, I don't want you really to hear or you don't need to hear what's going on in this video. I'm going to talk while you watch it, as a matter of fact, because I want you to watch this little girl. So the children at this point can be doing anything they want to be doing in the classroom. She chose a puzzle, and all she's doing is looking around at what the other children are doing. And at the moment, she's looking at a group of children who are playing in the dramatic play area. And I'm going to fast forward. So she does that you'll see she plays with the puzzle and then she'll look up again to see what the other children are doing. She goes back to the puzzle. And then here she's moved to a different activity and she's going to stop in the middle of this and also look. Sorry about the videos. These are homemade videos, so not the best videography skills, but she'll stop what she's doing to watch the children across the room. And so this was a child where the teacher said she's always interested in other children, but she just doesn't seem to know what to do with other kids. And so so here she goes looking at watching the other children, right? So we did this intervention that we refer to as stay, play, talk. And the way that we do it is, and you can do it in lots of different ways, is that we pair children up. So every child gets a couple of buddies. And for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, some little amount of time, we say, we're going to have buddy time. Find your buddies and stay, play, and talk. And we teach all the children, even the children who are these kind of low rate social interactions. We teach them too. So we're not teaching them, your friend Denise doesn't play, we want you to go play with her. Everybody's learning it, right? So we're not singling children out. So if you watch this is, whoops. So this is the same little girl in the blue shirt. And while I talk, you'll see that she's staying with her friends much more often. And as the video goes on, you'll see them actually sit down on the floor and play with something and actually have conversation. But what I was going to tell you that's pretty cool is, so in this study, it was great, but we did this study just recently where we did this intervention. And one of the things we were interested in was giving children some choices about who they played with. So now you'll see that they're playing together. And so the children who were the children who were identified to be kind of the target children, although we didn't call them that. That wasn't what it looked like at all. They would get to pick who their buddies were for the day. And we did this by asking them initially to pick from a set of pictures 5 children they would like to play with. And then they would pick 5. And then each day they would get to pick 2 of those to be their buddy. And what was interesting about this was not only did it work, not only did we increase the time that the children were engaged in interactions with their peers, but we also found that who we thought were the best peers were not necessarily the best peers, or were not necessarily the peers that the child would choose. So what actually, for 2 of the children, they had children in their buddy group, that had pretty significant disabilities, and they actually chose some of those children more often than they chose more, what you might consider to be more skilled social interaction partners. And so I think it's important as we're thinking about these kind of interventions that we give children some choice in it, because what we don't want to do is force children into some kind of interaction that's not natural or comfortable for them, right? We could talk a lot more about this. I'm sure y'all have questions about that. Another thing we often do, I want to just check my time here. Another thing we often do is what we call think, pair, share. So I've been in some of y'all's classrooms, and I think I've been in classrooms where there's 30 children in a classroom. So even if you do a small group reading to a smaller group of children, there might be 10 children in that group, right? And so we've been thinking a lot about how to not make activities like that too teacher directed. And so one of the things we use is this notion called think, pair, share, which simply means that when a teacher would or an educator would ask a group of children a question like, what do y'all think this book is going to be about? I wish I had a book right here, but um, we're going to read this book. What do y'all think it's going to be about? Rather than kind of having children jump in and out with their answers, right? And we do this thing called think, pair, share, which is, I want y'all to think really quietly. What do you think this book is going to be about? I want you to think. And then I want you to turn to your neighbor and I want you to tell them what you think this book is going to be about. And it's pretty amazing how quickly children learn to do this. And you have to sometimes be intentional about how you help children pair up. But what we find is that children very quickly have an answer. And so we did this study where we were trying to work on teachers using literacy practices in group. And what we found was that when educators ask a question of a group of children, the same children always respond, right? And so either they always respond because they're more extroverted, they're more outgoing, they're more comfortable talking in groups. Maybe they're more likely to respond because they're more likely to know the answer. But when you pair children up, everybody gets a chance to talk, right? And so those children who are quiet, those children who are less likely to want to talk in a group situation get an opportunity to talk. And you can structure it in a way where you give each group of pair of children an ear and a mouth, and you say, when you are holding the ear, you listen to your friend, and when you're holding the mouth, it's your turn to talk. Now switch, right? So if you need to build some structure in it for children, you can, but we find that children love think, pair, share, and it just takes a little bit of structure. And so what you see as I talk through all of these things is just different ways to increase the opportunities that children have to help, be kind to, be engaged with their friends, right? And then I'm only showing you this. So another strategy we talk a lot about is using the turtle technique, which is a way to help children learn to calm down and make better decisions, right? I had to think like a turtle in an airport the other day when I was not very happy. And I'm pretty sophisticated in my social skills and was able to do it. But we often say to children, you need to calm down. And calming down is a really complex thing to learn to do. And so we teach children to do it through this turtle technique, which is really about, you need to recognize that you're feeling stressed or anxious or scared or mad or angry, whatever it is. Stop your body, tuck inside your shell, take 3 deep breaths, and then come out and think of a solution. And the reason that I wanted to show this, and I hope this isn't clunky, but the reason I wanted to show this was because we have a really nice video of a teacher. Hold on one second. Of a teacher, one of the teachers who was in our. Oh, I know. I got to stop sharing this. Hold on. There we go. A teacher who was in. Oh, okay. Wait. Let me get it. I can't possibly talk and do this at the same time. Okay, now are you seeing it, Denise? Perfect. Okay, so this is not a, this is someone who has been involved in our research outside of Melbourne. She actually lives in Wagga Wagga, but she was involved as a coach and has been involved as a coach and trainer in some of our work. And so I wanted to just play a few little clips of her talking about Tucker the turtle, and you can see how it creates, again, opportunities for children to work together to solve what we would consider kind of common social problems.
Dear, and a great reminder to us.
The detail.
Yeah, well, I can see.
Can you hear,
I can
Denise?
see the detail on the drawing.
Oh,
Oh, yes, I can see that. It doesn't in the
Now,
top, it doesn't.
on that, get a bit of full air, yeah.
But he does need to be able to breathe, because I remember Tucker Turtle does take some deep breaths, doesn't he? So maybe just over here. Hello. Hello. I have a friend called Tucker Turtle. Do you want to hear about it? You do? Okay. Maddie is holding Tucker Turtle and the turtle. So Tucker used to get really mad if something like that happened where he tripped him, but now he can stop. So show me how you stop, Blake. Good. He keeps his hands and his body, and he's yelling to himself. Let's try and tuck his hands in like that. Oh, that's good. And can you tuck your hands in? Just pretend like that. Oh, that's good. Nice and cozy. He can tuck inside his shell and take 3 deep each solution. The end. Oh, so let's have a think about that then. So if I'm feeling upset because somebody's accidentally hurt me, or I fell over, or I'm just really tired. We can dress up. We could do a show of Tucker Turtle. So if something happened to me, you want to be the turtle? So tuck your head in, tuck your arms and body in, think like a turtle, and we're
Okay, we could watch that all day, and I love watching it because she's just so good at, let me share this again. She's so good at it, but one of the reasons that I wanted to show that was because let's get this back. There we go. Because I wanted to make you aware that in addition to all the resources and materials we've developed through our work here in the States, there are a lot of materials that have been Australianized, as we say it, that are also available online at no cost. And I'm going to actually put a link at the end of the PowerPoint, and then y'all will get a copy of the PowerPoint so you can get to all those videos and resources as well. All right, the last thing I want to talk about in just a few brief moments, so that if there are questions, we have time for a few, is that we think a lot about how what we do as adults in classrooms matter to children and matter in terms of peer relationships. And so we've really been working with teachers and educators to think about how they can have what we call difficult conversations with children, how they can navigate conversations with children when children say things that aren't nice about their friends, when children point out differences in a way that sounds harmful, when children reject other children. And we really think this is important. If you go back to that original or one of those earlier slides about feeling like you belong, feeling like you're heard, feeling like you're valued, it doesn't take many negative things, having many negative things said about you to feel like you don't belong. And so we've been talking to educators a lot about what children see you do and say matters, but also what they see, what you don't say matters, right? And so I'm just going to give you a little example of how we talk about this with teachers. These are some things that are real life things with names changed that we've heard children say, that somebody in our group that works on this project has heard children say. And what we do in our work is that we really think about, how do we help educators feel comfortable having these discussions? All of us, I'm sure, have been in a context where a child has said something hurtful and we don't know how to respond, right? And I think when we don't respond, it says to all the other children that what that child said is okay. And it says to the child who's potentially been hurt that nobody's here to help me, right? And so we talk with educators through a process, and I don't have enough time to go through this in any detail, where we say, use it as an opportunity to be curious, find out what children think. Why do you think Jamal's skin is dirty? What makes you think that? Tell me more about it, right? So we get them thinking, because most children are saying those things because they don't know, right? And so we're curious, we ask questions, we tell the truth. We're not afraid to use big words and say why children's skin is different color, right? We talk about the justice issue, and the justice issue might sound something like, when you say that, it's hurtful or it's unfair or it's it's unkind. We use those words. And then we speak our values. And our values might be something like, in our classroom, everybody can play with us, right? In our classroom, we treat people kindly. So if you can help educators think through those steps, I think it begins to help them feel more comfortable having these discussions with children. We also recognize that you don't always know what to say, right? We've all been in a situation where a child says something and you're like, how am I going to respond to that? And so we talk a lot about, if you can't think of what to say, what can you do? And sometimes you might just have to say something like, when I was a little kid, people didn't talk to me about these things, and I don't know what to say, but I'm going to think about it and we can talk a little bit more about it later. Or I'm going to ask Jamal to help me think about how to talk about that. Right? So the important thing is that we don't say nothing. That was not grammatically correct. The important thing is that we say something, that we don't allow a child to say something that's potentially hurtful without at least acknowledging it and acknowledging that we're going to help them think about it, or having an actual conversation. I think about one of my dearest friends has a daughter who uses a wheelchair. And when she was a little girl, we would be out in public and, kids would stare at Lizzie's wheelchair, and parents would, whoever's with the child, adults would say, don't stare, don't stare. And my friend Amy was always like, you want to come see Lizzie's wheelchair? This is kind of like a cool thing. Come on over. And just made it really normal. She really normalized it. And I think we get better with that the more that we work on it. All right, real quickly, and then I'll wrap up and see if you have questions. I didn't want to do this talk without acknowledging how important the role of families is in the work we do. And if I pulled back up the pyramid and showed you the bottom of the pyramid, the relationships tier is really about relationships with children, families, and colleagues, right? It's not just about relationships with children. And we really believe that that families are so critical to helping us support children's social emotional growth and development, and that we have to be proactive, not just in sharing what we know with families, but learning from families about what's important to them. And around social emotional development, it turns out that's even more critical than some other domains, in the sense that we've had experiences where we've taught children social skills that aren't compatible with what families want for children, right? And it's not that we might not still work on those skills in the context of the classroom and what it means to be a part of the classroom, but it means that I don't know if negotiating is the right word. We're working with families to go, when is this okay? When is this not okay? How can we make this more relevant to your child? How can we help your child feel like they belong in this classroom and at the same time respect your cultural belief about what's important around social emotional development? The other thing that's really important, I'm going to just put this next slide. Oh, where did it go? You probably can't read that. Anyway, it's a really cute little description about classrooms and how much we appreciate families' input into the classrooms. But the other thing that I was going to say about this was that it's also really important to us that if we have to deal with a social, emotional, or behavioral issue with a family, that we have a good relationship with that family before we have to deal with something that's hard, right? That they know how much we care about their child, that we know how much that they know how much we care about doing what is important to them. So I'm going to end with, I think there's another, oh, there's what I wanted you to see, but I'm going to end with this slide. And you'll get those other slides that I just passed really quickly. So a mom of two children recently said this to me. So she has a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and the 6-year-old has pretty intensive support needs but is fully included in a kindergarten classroom. And the mom said to me, I hope they both have authentic friendships with children with and without disabilities, but really my simplest hope for them is that they find friends who don't ask them to dim their lights to earn friendship or love. And I think that's such a statement about how important it is for us as educators to create contexts where children can shine, regardless of what they look like, regardless of what the families are they come from, regardless of whether they have disabilities. And so we like to think that we're all about creating super friends and children who want to help their friends, children who see value in their friends, children who respect their friends. So I'm going to end with that. I know we have like 2 minutes, but Denise, are there any questions?